we have identified some very, very interesting anomalous type of aircraft.
Traffic is quite luminous and is exhibiting some non-ballistic motion, over.
Move very rapidly at any speed or whether any direction it wanted to go. Fly could change and go to the right or the left or go crossways without hesitating a bit.
What do you think it was?
Well, if they call it a flying saucer, that's what it is.
EWA 517, do you want to report a UFO? Over. Negative. We don't want to report.
Look, it wasn't my worst Wednesday night.
Good evening, everybody. This is Smiles Lewis with another live edition of Anomaly-NOW. Live from Austin, Texas. This is the weekly news roundup show for the nonprofit 501c3 Scientific Anomaly Institute, aka Anomaly Archives. Thank you for joining us. You can find out more about our organization at anomalyarchives.org. That's ANOMALY archives.org. Plenty of people misspell that, so don't feel too bad if you do. All right, so this is going to be a little bit of a promo show, as we have been doing the past few weeks for each Saturday's new emergency fundraiser Streamathon series that we have launched back on November 21st, and we're holding them every Saturday until the end of the year. The original goal was to raise $20,000, our annual budget for 3/4 of which was our rent, as well as the rest of that being just general expenses, because, you know, you got expenses when you're running an organization. And we were trying to stay at our current location. The bad news is that we just found out last week that our landlord is not going to be able to renew our lease. They are themselves suffering from the same kinds of problems that we are here in Austin, Texas, with the pandemic. So many organizations and individuals and so many people in general are suffering. And I know it's a hard time for everybody, but we are asking that if you can support us, to please do so. The really big good news is that we reached our first milestone. We got our pledge graphic ready, I think, for to show folks that is that going to work? Let's see. I guess I have to add that. There we go. So little Patty Bigfoot, she has been levitating up towards the saucer, the goal of $20,000 being the tip of the saucer. And we have reached our $5,000 mark, but we had a very generous $5,000 challenge matching grant from actually one of the presenters, but they want to remain anonymous. And we hit that 5,000 today, and we have finally made it to our halfway point. So we are halfway there, folks. This is a tremendous thing for us. We are now looking for a new location. So if you know anything about Austin and know of any good, inexpensive places that are friendly to nonprofits, please send an email to contact@anomalyarchives.org, or go to the website and you can find the email link there, or the phone number, and you can leave a voicemail with all the details. We could use your help in this hunt to find a new location for the Anomaly Archives. All right. Well, hey, joining us again. It's been a couple of weeks. Hey, Mark, how are you doing?
Hey, I'm doing well, Miles. Thank you very much. I'm excited to be back on the show, and I know the fundraiser is going so very well, and you guys are doing a great job. So much content. Frankly, I'm having a hard time keeping up.
Me too. We're halfway through the event series, so it's 5 weeks, 6 Saturdays, and we just finished our third one. Folks can go to the website. They can go to our YouTube channel if you're already there, probably, unless you're watching this on Facebook. But on the YouTube channel are all the archives, the full length archives. Those will only be there for a little while. So if you want to see and experience the whole raw 7+ hour version, those are there for a little while. But they've also already been broken up into the separate lectures, so that if there's a specific lecture you want to go to, you can just click on that and listen to that. And we've got them into separate playlists for each of the previous days. So there's Streamathon week 1, week 2, week 3. And so we are getting ready for week 4. And so at least one of our guests for speakers for this weekend is here with us now. And that is Aaron Gulyas. Aaron, let's see if we can get you on here.
Welcome, Aaron.
And there we go.
Hi.
All right.
Hi.
Well, let's do that. How's it going, Aaron?
Good, pretty good. How are you guys doing?
Good, thank you.
Doing well, thank you. Aaron is one of the presenters. I've known of Aaron's work for quite some time. I'm not really sure where I first learned about you and your efforts and your interest in these subjects. You're a professor, you teach, and you've been published in both, I guess, more popular literature publications. Actually, I think Paul Kimball may be who I first heard of you through, and he helped publish at least one of your works. But you've actually had some very pricey, I might add, academic texts.
I didn't set the prices. That one, the Paranormal and the Paranoid, the conspiratorial TV book was I probably the most fun writing that, because I got to write a whole lot of DVDs off on my taxes. But they published it at it was a Roman and Littlefield, who are an academic press, and it was like $80 or something like that. And shockingly, the only people who bought it were libraries. So, which is, hey, that's great. But I think you probably first heard me through Kimball, or I was on Radio Mysterioso way back. So it might have been there. Too. So so I talk about flying saucers and history and flying saucer history, and on my podcast, The Saucer Life, on Wednesdays.
Yep. And full disclosure, this is not a paid promotion, but my hobby web radio station, Anomaly-Radio.com, that I've been doing since last century, that added Aaron's exceptional podcast. It is one of my favorite podcasts. A very digestible length. So mostly I would say short form, but you have gotten longer and longer with some of the episodes, and they always just tickle my funny bone and hit all the points that I'm interested in as a Fortean who has an appreciation for UFO culture, both the like what is the nature of the phenomena, but actually, even more so like examining the culture surrounding it in terms of the researchers and the experiencers.
Yeah, that's what we try to do. Looking at, I think we might be the only UFO podcast out there that devotes whole episodes just to looking at magazines, because magazines are awesome. So stuff like that. It's not current events. Current events are great, but you can't really get much perspective on them. So try to wait 70 years before we talk about them.
Okay, Mark, shelve those news articles.
Patiently waiting, no problem.
You guys can do current events all you want, but I teach history, so it keeps me from having to comment on current events.
Well, so I was going to mention. Oops, wait, that's not the one. So we, as I mentioned, Aaron is one of the speakers that we have coming up this weekend. We have a great lineup of folks. You can go to anomalyarchives.org and see the list of all the presenters, as well as this Saturday's upcoming schedule, which I can't quite read that. But so I'll be welcoming everybody at our usual 1 p.m. Central Standard Time start. And then we're going to have Michael Hughes presenting on demystifying tarot. And then Aaron, that's when we got you on at 2:15 p.m. Doing a Contactee countdown, the top most influential or at least fun of the UFO contactees. And then following Aaron is Micah Hanks, who's going to be talking UFOs, a historical perspective. Hey, there's that historical stuff again. And our newest Anomaly Archives board member, Ed Conroy, author of the famous Report on Communion, one of my favorite books exploring the nature of Whitley Strieber's experiences. And his is going to be a reflection on his decades of experience with this. What's it all about, Alfie? Reflections on 5 decades of anomalies, local and global. And so I list here surprise mystery programming. It's not a surprise. I'm going to play a lecture that I gave a couple of years ago about my own personal experience with the quote unquote mystery hum phenomenon. I experienced this for just under a month's time, and thankfully it ended. But in that time, it really got me looking into this phenomena even more than I already had. It's obviously something that most people have heard of, with like the Taos hum or the Windsor hum or these other geographic location hums. What is it? What are all these people hearing? And maybe it's not all one thing. So we'll be doing that. And then coming after that at 6 p.m. Central Standard Time is Steve Kohlhase giving his talk, a brief introduction on his perspective on the mystery hum, which he likens to the GPS hypothesis, the gas pipeline syndrome hypothesis. And you can kind of guess where that goes. But then that's going to lead into a viewing, a screening for our virtual drive-in portion of the evening with Doom Vibrations, a documentary by director Garret Harkawik, who I believe is going to be joining us. I'm really looking forward to meeting him and talking to him and Steve. I really, I don't necessarily subscribe to Steve's perspective, but I think it's one of many very interesting hypotheses that perhaps can explain that phenomena. But that's the lineup for this coming weekend. I think it's going to be great, and I'm really excited about all this wonderful these wonderful presentations. I think folks who haven't ever heard Aaron are going to be have a great time. Aaron, what can you tell us a little bit more about your talk?
Yeah, it's going to be a contactee countdown of the most influential or fun contactees. And that's about as far as I've gotten. No, I'm still sort of winnowing down the contactee list. You start off with like, oh, I got all these great names, and then you realize that they're going to get about 45 seconds a piece. If I don't, cut it down a little bit. So it's hopefully going to be a mix of the solidly influential guys like Adamski and Van Tassel, with some of the more, I don't know if whimsical is the right word, but whimsical. I think Truman Bethram, is on the whimsical side.
Yes.
The guy whose name Reinhold Schmidt. I might talk about Reinhold Schmidt just because of the all the fraud. They actually made it to court, not just the flying saucer fraud, but the actual crooked land deal fraud type of stuff that he related to his contact experiences. Just a clue. If somebody tries to sell you mineral rights based on what they learned from the Space Brothers, it's probably not on the up and up. The Space Brothers don't really go in for that sort of thing. And then there's going to be some contactees probably that aren't really people that you would put in the column of contactees. I'm thinking of some names, but they're contactees, but they're usually put in another ufological category. But I'm going to talk about why they're really contactees. No, it's not Whitley Strieber. Don't worry. I'm not going. Although I could.
Hey,
but,
why not?
It's he's really more of an archetypal contactee in a lot of ways than just an abductee.
Very much so. Yeah.
He's got a message, and he's always had a message, and the message is far more important than the sort of, I wonder who these beings are and what planet they're from, and all that stuff. So the message is important, which you don't often get with, or at least it's a wholesome message. It's an important message. It's a message with some meat to it, as opposed to the David Jacobs, they're breeding with our women and are going to take our souls sort of stuff, which isn't uplifting necessarily. But yeah, a bunch of contactees, and absolutely no judgment for me about the degree to which they were lying.
Well, Aaron, let me ask you a quick question. When you say the term contactee, for both myself and the audience tonight, can you put a book range on that? Is that simply viewing an extraterrestrial, or is that something where they're having just an interaction of some kind, but can you define the contactee for us, please?
That's a good question. I think for the purposes of this and more generally what I do, I tend to view it in terms of somebody who's not only had a sighting, not only had an interaction with an otherworldly being, but somebody who's had some kind of relationship, usually an ongoing relationship with someone who is generally human, not just humanoid, but they are
Space Brothers.
They're human, but from Mars or Venus. So that's the way I sort of winnow it down. Otherwise, we get into the whole humanoid contact thing, which is again distinct from abductions, but its own weird little slice of the folklore sometimes. So just to keep it in a nice sort of neat little package, I like to sort of emphasize the relationship, and especially having some sort of message that they are relaying on behalf of the space people, usually for some political or cultural polemical purpose, trying to engage social change, political change, economic change here on Earth, under the cover of I Met the Space Brothers. Yeah.
So on a previous show, we were Mark and I were lamenting that we hadn't watched yet the new, is it James Fox, the Phenomenon documentary? I watched it last night. Okay. Have either of y'all seen it yet?
No.
Okay. Well, maybe we won't go down that road, but I just wanted to finally give an update. I did finally watch this, and while it started slow with a very traditional historical perspective on, just I almost painfully. I mean, I was kind of like, oh my God, really? Is this really what this is going to be? Because I'd heard such good things, but it definitely went off into the areas that I'd heard it did, and features, of course, Jacques Vallée and has the aerial is it Rwanda school mass sighting, as well as the Zimbabwe. And also the I'm gonna get the Australian mass kid school sightings, and very compelling, and but what reminded me of it, because even though these were just traditional quote unquote close encounters, but they were on a massive scale, but they really, even though the beings, like with the Zimbabwe case, were described and drawn by the kids as being like, or I believe at the time, drawn like the classic short gray aliens that are more associated with the abduction phenomena. The tenor of the communication that was experienced telepathically was very much, I mean, I guess it was a combination of the abductee communications and the contactee, but it had that element, to my mind, of just like you're saying, that there was an agenda, that there was, but this was not necessarily coming from the kids. I don't think these kids had, and to spoiler alert, it's that there's an issue with technology and our over reliance on it, and this was actually in their early testimony and this new reunited years later testimony. The sense that, like, literally the eyes were transmitting this telepathic message that we're just relying too much on technology, and that it's not for the betterment of the planet. But and that's something that's with both. I mean, Aaron, I'd be curious to know, what your sense is of the real difference between the message of the aliens, the Space Brother aliens of Contactee phenomena, versus those of the classic abduction phenomena.
Yeah, it's tough, because you kind of wonder if we take what experiencers say at face value, that's one thing, and I think that's something we should it's the only safe way to do it, if we're sort of examining these stories and trying to get some sort of meaning out of the stories they tell, to instantly sort of say, well, you're lying, how do I know you're not, how do I know you're telling the truth? So if we take as read that the people relaying their experiences are doing so in good faith and honestly, that still, for me, there's still the question out there of were they lied to? Were the beings they had to encounter with, were they upfront? Were they honest? Is there an agenda beyond what they're saying? Is this sweetness and light and space brothers, or is this we are going to breed with your women and take over your souls sort of stuff? Those two sort of bad grays, good space brothers things. What if, sort of classic Star Trek style plot twist, the ugly, evil seeming creatures are the good ones, and the nice blonde jumpsuited people, they're the bad guys, who are trying to subvert us. So I don't think there's necessarily, we're relying on testimony of what beings that are from somewhere, somewhen, someplace else are saying. And so it's hard to determine what they really mean. We know what they say, but do they mean what they say? And is the difference between what they mean and what they say intentional? Or is it just a function of how language does not necessarily work between them and us? There's these layers of interpretation and meaning and signs and symbols and sort of the semiotics of what we associate things with. Like the medical stuff, we just, in the Western world, we see this medical stuff and we think experimentation, because we see it as what we would do. So we see what the Greys do with abductees as analogous to what we do with frogs in biology class or something like that. But that's because we're seeing it through this lens of our own experience. And I think sometimes we don't have the linguistic tools to really comprehend what they're saying to us, and they might not have the tools to communicate with us clearly. And I think the same goes for the contactees. I think they see that through the same sort of gauzy veil of unreality that later experiencers do. So in summary, I have no idea.
That's the right answer right there.
I have no idea, because there's so many weird factors out there. It's, somebody said once, well, maybe it's all in their mind. And I replied, well, that's even scarier if it's all in our mind that this is taking place, because then, we can't even get outside it to sort of study it. So it's all very weird. And I think that the sort of mass experiences like the school kid cases are some of the most fascinating ones, because you've got all these people having, the same or similar experiences. It's like the whole sort of, it's almost a cliche now, the whole, DMT trip where everybody has the same hallucination. It's like there's something outside us going on there. It's just, we don't necessarily know how to talk about it yet.
There's also those theories out there, Aaron, where these entities sometimes present themselves in the form by which it's easiest for them to accept the experience, versus someone just having a random experience like your typical gray alien or whatnot. So can you speak just very briefly to this notion of how there are some theories where this interaction takes place in a context by which it's easier for us, the human, to have that experience than it is with the actual phenomena itself that's presenting itself to us?
Yeah, I think that makes sense. One of the things when we started talking about that, what I was thinking of was some of Orfeo Angelucci's experiences. There's one scene in one of his books where he and his space brother friend are sitting in a diner, and he takes another dose of the magic dissolving pill in the liquid that it's basically some sort of mind altering substance. But as I'm reading this, I'm thinking, was he even in a diner having dinner? Was the entire thing a construct designed to put him at ease, designed to get all of the, oh my God, what is going on? Where am I? I do not understand this otherworldly hell you've plunged me into. Just, okay, no, you're sitting in a restaurant, Orfeo, everything's fine. Because maybe it's the sort of thing where if humans were to see where they were and what they were really communicating with, their minds just, you couldn't handle it. Some sort of Lovecraftian thing where I saw the face of God and it was terrible, that sort of thing. If you're going to have a conversation with a human, you've got to sort of like you said, sort of calm the human down and get them to a place where they their guard is down and they're not, their brain isn't melting out their ears in horror, right? Because we're not used to these sorts of things.
And again, spoiler alert. To go back to the phenomenon, I had heard so much that it was a pro ETH thing, and people were even wondering why Valet was associating with this when it's so clearly pro ETH. But honestly, by the end of it, and I don't want to give away the ending, but I mean, basically, the narrator, I guess, I think it's Peter Coyote. Of course, he does all the UFO documentaries, right? I actually thought it was James Fox, but I'm anyway. It puts forth this whole thing of we are interacting with some alien other that's here with us, has been. And we just, all we can do is engage with it through the lenses of our enculturation. And thus, of course, we're going to see it in these contexts. And just as in movies like Contact with Jodie Foster and so many others, where the aliens or whatever these others have to somehow calm down your senses. And this is actually very much like what Mark mentioned with the DMT thing. It's like what they told Terrence McKenna allegedly, that calm down, look at what we're doing. Don't worry about like what we look like or whatever. Just and I think that there's so much obsession over the theatrics and the trappings, and not more the symbolic potential interpreted meanings of some of this stuff.
Well, Miles, I think the point that you made about this notion that they've been here the whole time and that we just simply coexist with these entities, that reminds me of the story a number of weeks ago that you and I had talked about, where there's this notion from the CIA where some entities can be just outside of the spectral range by which humans can perceive their environment. And if there's, if we just lack a certain range, again, of the spectral range, we wouldn't be able to perceive them unless under special circumstances, or a circumstance by which maybe, say, a technology then brings said entities within the range by which we can perceive them.
I definitely think that there are lenses. There are they live glasses that people can put on, paradigm style, to invoke Robert Anton Wilson, that can help them gain a new perspective on these things. So,
hey, when it comes to contactees, Aaron, does Valiant Thor make your list?
Oh,
he's got to be the most famous contactee ever, right?
He shows up everywhere. He shows up everywhere now because somebody's been republishing old stuff and putting Valiant Thor Presents on the cover, even though it had nothing to do with Valiant Thor at all. I won't mention anything about that, but beyond the fact that that's a thing that a person is doing. But Valiant Thor, he shows up with Frank Strange as one of the funniest and shadiest characters in all of ufology, and it was Howard Menger. He and his crewmates show up at one of Howard Menger's outdoor lectures. That's where the famous photo of Val Thor, that's from one of Howard Menger's get-togethers. Somebody, I can't remember where I read this, but somebody said basically Gray Barker hired somebody to drive up there and take some pictures and pretend to be Val. That Gray Barker was really behind a lot of this, but that's it's almost a cop out at this point to say, well, that was Gray Barker having fun. It's like, well, he can't have been everything.
All right.
Everything weird that went on. But Valiant Thor is probably gonna make the list just because he's got just the most outlandish story. I think it's way more likely that George Adamski went to a flying saucer and rode around, then Val Thor sort of hung out in the Pentagon talking to Eisenhower and Nixon,
Right.
for a few years, and now we know about this.
By the way, I love your pronunciation of Adamski. Every time I hear you do it on the show, your podcast, I'm like, I need to work that into my repertoire. I like it. It's nice. Is it correct? I don't
know.
Is Frank Strange's, was he in the classic science fiction Invaders from Mars? Is he in that? I know there's a whole, like, there's a special section that's like, I think, excised from like one distributed version of it that's like an astronomer talking about UFOs. It's like this weird digression or something.
That sounds really familiar.
But I think I may be thinking of a different movie, but there's so many flying saucer movies from that era, it can be hard to.
I swear he shows up somewhere, though.
Yeah. Well, we are at the 7:30 mark, but I had said to Mark, I'd said that we haven't had the chance to do any news roundup, and there's at least a couple of news stories that definitely seem connected and very interesting to my mind. And you're welcome to stick around, Aaron. But I understand
I have
if you
to take off. But
okay.
But thanks for having me on, and I can't wait till Saturday. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Looks like a great lineup on Saturday, so it's going to be great. Hope everybody shows up.
All right. Well, thank
you, Aaron. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks
Talk
a lot.
to you guys later.
All right. All right. That's Aaron Gulyas. You can go to Saucer. Now, see, I always forget if there's a "the" in the. No, it's just saucerlife.com. Saucerlife.com is where you can find Aaron's podcast. Love it. I really enjoy it. I was going to tell him, he's one of his taglines is, no snark. There's a little snark.
Yeah.
And I like that. But anyway.
Well, people too that keep an open mind, snark is another way of saying keep an open mind with all this, let the creative aspects come out. So it's funny, people send me news links to post to our Flipboard, and you and one of our other volunteers, Victor Criterion, I'm looking at you, had sent me links to a number of the same articles, and of course they all end up on the Flipboard, which I'm going to go to now if I can figure that out here. And yeah. So tons of great stuff over at our Anomaly Archives Flipboard. Of course, the link is over on anomalyarchives.org. Last week, we talked about this monolith mania. It's crazy. Like, okay, something is placed in the desert in 2014, 2015, discovered 5 years later, and everybody's going ape crap crazy. And artists are reproducing it everywhere. And the original one is taken down, not disappears, it's taken down. And I thought this was interesting, just briefly, that when we talked last week about the Utah one being taken down, we talked about the fact that there was some footage of somebody saw the people taking it down, but they weren't the ones who put it up. In fact, they are just some extreme sports people, like, I forget when by that, what I mean, like dirt bike riders and others, but who are advocating for, environmental reasons for why they took it down. They're saying that they took it down because it was causing this mass pilgrimages of people to the site in Utah, and there was no infrastructure to support that level of tourism, and that their crap and trash was littering the ground. And so I thought that was a very interesting reason for them taking it down. But then, of course, they're sprouting up everywhere. And this obviously has real symbolic value and power in the sense of people associating it with the movie 2001, which obviously has to do with alien contact. And it's in the midst of all this other UFO news. That's, the continuing story of ATIP, OSAP,
to the Stars Academy, trying to bring the truth to the people, and all of that. And our good friends Micah and others launching this new debrief website that's focusing on the UFO UAP phenomena from a perspective that really fits hand in glove. Like, I got to say, I mean, it's like, well, they saw a good marketing opportunity there. Let's launch a new website that's all about aviation threat technology and UAPs and UFOs. So, and then all these other news articles. So I don't know what you think, Mark, of all the monolith mania, but.
Well, the monolith thing here is so many people and researchers, Pazolski, et cetera, spent so much time in her book talking about
Pasulka.
I'm sorry, you guys, Pasulka. But they spent so much time talking about the money, effort, interest, and infrastructure set up by the government to retrieve tiny little particles of potential metals in the desert that represent crashed craft or some sort of off-world technology. I find it hard to believe that the government didn't have a mechanism and infrastructure in place to go grab this thing the second they heard about it, and it was a bunch of rock climbers and dirt bike riders that were the ones that end up taking it down. So for me, that's where a little bit of a discrepancy lies, because if there was a real mystery or something that was vetted, where this wasn't just an artist doing something beautiful in the desert with the contrast between the metals and then the sandstones behind it, you'd sure think that there would have been some black helicopters flying in there and taking this thing down before a bunch of dirt bike riders would.
Well, it's interesting too, because when I saw it, the first one, it really reminded me of something, and I couldn't. It was just gnawing at me, and I don't have this ready to show, but back in the 1990s, when I was publishing my briefly print zine, but then it became a web zine, ELF, Elf Infested Spaces, Journal of Possible Paradigms. I was working at the public library here in Austin, Texas, and processing all the periodicals, and I saw this amazing issue of Art in America, this big glossy coffee table magazine that was from the art industry community, whatever, and it had a cover article about an artist whose last name is McCracken, and they were these shiny, reflective, monolith-like objects, more, not just like rectangular, but sometimes triangular as well. And I finally, when I clicked on that, I went back and I found the archive. It's on archive.org. I think it's not on my website anymore, but I was looking at that and I was like, well, I wonder, I wasn't even sure what he was doing anymore. So I Google McCracken monolith, and lo and behold, New York Times and other big mainstream news outlets are like, other people had the same resonance, like, oh my God, that looks like so much of his artwork. And in fact, there's actually been some juxtapositions of his work and the one in Utah, and it's very striking. But I mean, it's such a simple image, it's such a simple structure, it doesn't surprise me that there could be that kind of resonance or similarity. But sure enough, I wasn't alone. We are not alone. That there's the others that were thinking the same thing. Of course, he passed away years ago, I think in maybe 2011. But then of course the idea was, well, could he have orchestrated something before his death to be done in such a way? But others are saying no, that was not that was not the kind of approach to his art that he took.
Well, let's take a look at this, Smiles, structurally. Okay, this thing is obviously vertically oriented. It's in a sandstone sort of opening. Okay, it's surrounded by rock and all like that. Well, did these mountain bikers or whoever took this down say that there were lag bolts holding this into the sandstone? Was the sandstone carved out to a depth by which it could support the column? So how is this monolith actually attached to the ground is going to give you a lot of idea about its provenance. and maybe who did it, or to what extent a technology was used, etc. So those details right there are going to ferret out a lot about how this was achieved, pulled off, etc. Anyway.
Indeed. And actually, I think it was those same extreme sports folks that took it down who said that one of the other things they criticized whoever did this was the way that it had cracked the floor of the desert, or the rock that it was embedded in such a way that they felt was deleterious. I believe our crew have brought up. Yeah. So this is on the right here is one of McCracken's pieces inside of a space where you can see that there's a stairwell around it. And here to the left is the original Utah monolith, I believe. I don't know. When I look at that, the Utah one, I don't. To me, it just looks like it's embedded in dirt. So I don't know about it being like in a rock that was damaged or defaced. Obviously, I mean, honestly, when I heard about dirt bike riders or whatever criticizing somebody for messing up the environment, I got a little incensed, because that's not something I typically think of extreme sports people being conscientious of. But that's my own bias, and I'm sure that they can be as ecologically aware and conscientious as others. So, but this. It's just amazing to me that it has triggered this copycat effect. And I, as viewers of my past other shows know, I am fascinated by copycat effects, because I think that it affects so much of our life. It's this whole idea of memes and self-perpetuating ideas. And this is certainly one of them. And it obviously is a symbol that's had massive resonance in the collective psyche of humanity. And who knows where it's going to go. I think now it's taken on, thankfully, a tenor of just creativity, and it's an opportunity for people to inject a little whimsy, perhaps, into people's everyday life by going, what's that about? That's kind of weird, and it is such a stark image. Anyway, enough of that. Unless you
beautiful though. At the same time, it's absolutely beautiful. Regardless of the environmental impacts, whatever the vision was by the artist or whatnot. Like you said, the contrast, it's absolutely beautiful. What a beautiful image.
Yeah. So speaking of beautiful images, you and others have sent me these links to this Amazon rainforest art that's allegedly 8 miles long. This is some massive canvas wall of art by these ancient peoples. And this says rock art found in the Amazon rainforest carries images of the area's earliest inhabitants living alongside giant ice age creatures. Researchers say that they are estimated to have been made between 11,800 and 12,600 years ago, towards the end of the last ice age. This is just amazing. Oh, it didn't. I clicked and it didn't. Hold on. Let me see. I was trying to share that. Where is it? There we go. So folks can see a little bit more of that. That's just one of the sections there. We've got links in the Flipboard to a video that I think actually pans across multiple parts of it. This is just phenomenal. But you were bringing up some points about this and how it connects to other articles on our Flipboard.
Yeah, we always want to look at the correlation between some of these, some of this research and some of the stories that are on the Flipboard. What I found today that was very interesting, first off, is the dates of this particular, and I'm not sure how they're deriving the dates for these rock wall paintings. They're saying about 11,500 to basically 12,500 years ago. Well, immediately when I hear that, I think of the last major extinction event on the Earth that was known as the Younger Dryas. And so there's a lot of research right now about what caused the Younger Dryas extinction event. And so researchers here for this particular rock art are saying that this was during or before the last ice age, So we got to figure out, first of all, how they're getting that date range. And then we have to rectify, okay, how come this date range for this rock art is also lining up with the last mass extinction event? So those are two very interesting aspects to the science behind this particular article. Now, however, this correlates very strongly then if we're going to use the last major extinction event on the Earth, or the younger dryas event, to what the theories are, or what's been what's theorized about what caused that last major extinction event. Because we know none of these megafauna species exist today, so clearly there was an event. And so one of the theories that's gaining a lot of momentum right now, and I'll say that kind of loosely in terms of scientific, or at the academic spheres, etc., is the whole notion that the sun goes through a cyclical micronova event. Okay, and so what this is where the sun kind of sheds its outer, layer through the different fusion processes inside of the sun. Okay, well, that correlates exactly to the other story that we're looking at in the Flipboard. And by the way, folks, if you go to the Flipboard, you can make all these correlations yourselves. But we're coming out of a solar minimum. And just this week, we have a double kind of whammy coming from the sun expected in a couple of days that will demonstrate by which even a minor event on the sun can then have such macro scale effects on the Earth. So we have coronal holes, and then we also have a coronal mass ejection, kind of a 1-2 punch coming on Thursday. And it'll be very interesting to see the way that this solar event is going to affect, infrastructure on the Earth, to what extent, what latitude, etc. So this is very interesting. We have this rock wall painting. We have the dates correlating to the last mass extinction event. And then we also have in demonstrating literally this week that will back up a positive mechanism by what, ended the last ice age. Some folks think that, for example, there was a comet or an asteroid that hit one of the greater ice sheets that caused a mass melting, and that's what actually ended the last ice age. But, again, very, very interesting, the dates, and then very, very interesting that we actually have an analog for one of the theories this week, literally happening this week. So anyway, great stuff on the Flipboard as usual, Miles.
And there's so much more. The whole Jacques Vallée was just here in Austin being interviewed by Joe Rogan with James Fox about the Phenomenon documentary. There's these new talk about these new UFOs photos taken by fighter jet pilots with their cell phone cameras, I believe, from inside their jet fighters of some fairly recent alleged encounters, and then. And of course, then there's an image that's circulating that's clearly not what's being described, but people are like, that looks clearly like a mylar balloon. So that's almost throwing doubt on the original story, but the original story clearly isn't describing a mylar balloon. So, or is it?
That's interesting though, Miles, because even the Fravor interviews during the original Tic Tac video, that was taken, Fravor continually references this idea that, or other pilots that witnessed this sphere inside of a cube. Okay, he keeps saying that. So he'll say, well, what I saw is very strange. And then, these other pilots I talked to, there's this cube with a sphere inside of it just hovering in midair. And how do you explain that? Well, I actually looked into that, and it turns out that's an Israeli, what they call a CubeSat, basically a piece of technology that is a kind of balloon that's a relay system. And in fact, on my Twitter account, I actually showed a photo of that, I think over a year ago now. So unfortunately, we have very credible witnesses like Fravor, who actually witnessed the Tic Tac, referencing what is very debunked as just kind of an experimental piece of technology that's been deployed in the sort of daisy chain communication systems that they're trying to build out over the ocean and whatnot. And that has its own very long history. So it's convoluted. We have these great witnesses referencing really debunked technologies. And that's exactly what we're seeing in these latest photographs again, just you can go online in 20 minutes. You're going to find solid images of these things, and it turns out that they're just relay telecommunication technology devices. So anyway.
Yep, and like I say, there's so much more there. There's all kinds of news about rare wildlife sightings and encounters in Texas, and so much more. And this you mentioned the Israeli technology. This Israeli defense guy talking about joint alien human bases underground on Mars. So very interesting stuff, whatever one makes of it. So,
hey, one thing I want to add before we get off the rock art, I personally am trying to get the imagery compiled for the entire 8 miles, because I think you're right. It was supposedly 8 miles worth of imagery. But guess what I'm looking for in that imagery? You got to know this. Gigantopithecus.
Oh.
Is there any reference to all this megafauna to Sasquatch or any sort of cryptozoological imagery that might exist in there? Because we're only getting snapshots of some of these more well-known figures, but I'm wondering, and I will get to the bottom of this maybe by next week, if I can view the imagery across the entire 8 miles worth of paintings, if there's anything that does look similar to or could be viewed as an analog to some of our favorite cryptozoological, creatures that have supposedly been with us this entire time.
That's a great angle on that. I hadn't even thought of that. Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, well, we could keep going on and on, but I got to sleep sometime.
Yeah. Super fun tonight. Aaron was excellent. I'm looking forward to this weekend's content. Just again, Miles, what a great job pulling that off. Congratulations, meeting that first milestone. Everybody, very interesting. Yeah. By the way, I met a professor from UT in the chemistry department this weekend and told him about the archives. And man, this guy lit up. I mean, he had no idea that such thing existed and whatnot. He was asking me for the address. I gave it to him. Unfortunately, now we're looking for a new home. But the point is, even at that at that academic level, once these guys or these women and folks are exposed to this whole idea that you've done all this work and these archives exist, man, this guy lit up. You should have seen his eyes open. He couldn't wait to get down there. So not only is it this sort of effort, but at that ground roots level, word of mouth, etc. This is exciting stuff, and we need to just keep it going.
Absolutely, and thank you for that, and thank you for spreading the word. That's what we need. If folks, if you can donate, that's great. If you've already donated, that's great. If you can't donate, just please help us spread the word. That's the main thing we need right now. Is we just need more people who have never heard about it and who will like what we're doing and be interested in supporting us. So, I just want to thank everybody for everything that they've done, and thank you, Mark, for joining us. It's great to have you back, and we'll do it again soon. So have a great night.
Take care, everybody. Thank you.